The Go Radio Business Show with Trywire.com.
Tom, good morning.
Good morning, Willie.
Brilliant to see you. Obviously, you're down the line today, so if there's any interference, we know it's coming for you. Just the normal there.
Yeah, so I'm just coming back from Trump's state visit, and no, I wasn't there.
You know what I couldn't believe, Tom, right? And I seen this morning, right? That he couldn't wait to tell the press on the way back to the States on Air Force One that it was him that got Sadiq Khan blocked for coming to the banquet. And yet, a guy that he just took a $15 billion lawsuit out against, Rupert Murdoch, was at the banquet.
Yeah, I do find it amazing how he finds the time to get his petty vindictions in there, Willie, but he definitely does it. You know, he's sacking people in TV shows who don't agree with him, and he's busy.
It's what gets him out of bed in the morning. He loves it. He loves the battle. Let's talk about his visit. I know we've seen all the pomp and ceremony. Obviously, the king lavishing praise on him and vice versa. But the interesting part for us is obviously the announcements about business. And yes, on the face of it, you know, it's whatever paper you read, it's a 150 billion investment or 250 billion investment. And then there's a caveat behind the scenes where all these major investors are saying to Sky off the record that, by the way, it could be 10 times that if the UK got their act together.
Wow. Well, yeah. I mean, I was reading, trying to sort the wheat from the chaff, because obviously governments want to pump up what they have done during this visit. I think the first thing to say is that the King and Keir Starmer did a good job at treating Trump royally. I don't think anybody does it better than Britain from that point of view. And I think Trump looked quite chuffed with himself during the visit, Willie. But from what I can gather, we had some big tech company announcements. Microsoft, 30 billion over 4 years. Nvidia, a multi-billion investment in Britain, all to do with AI. We had Palantir, a company which the viewers and listeners might not know much about. Very interesting company backed by, I would say, the new Prince of Darkness, Peter Thiel. Look him up if you don't know him. Blackstone, which is a private equity house, came up with the biggest headline, 100 billion over 10 years, but there'll be debt involved with that, Willie. And so it's never quite what it seems. We didn't get anywhere in steel, and I could read nothing about whiskey. I don't know if you picked up anything.
No, they got nothing on whiskey. They said it was mentioned, but that nothing had happened, and that'll be down to the guys who are in the room doing a trade agreement. It won't be what the politicians are saying. That the guys behind the scenes in the trade department will work out whether Scotland's going to get the tariff lifted on whiskey, but we'll wait and see. But it was interesting, just to finish on that, the thing was going swimmingly until yesterday when Beth Rigby from Sky asked him the question about Peter Mandelson being removed from office, and his reply was, "I don't know the guy."
Which is a total lie.
Exactly. So, and I don't know how he didn't think that people would see that. But what was interesting, and I seen Beth Rigby talking this morning, when she said it was amazing that all the American pack of journalists come up to her after it and says, well done, because they were all terrified to ask that question.
And do you think, Willie, now that he has just put the fear into anybody who's going to question him, which is a terrible thing, actually, but do you think that's the state we're in?
It's a terrible thing if you're in America, right? There's no such thing now. I mean, he's tearing up amendment after amendment, right? So I don't know what's left of the Constitution, but let's see what happens. But on that theme, a bit of that news about investment, here is all around AI. And it's great to see that we're going to, the Data Vita who have a place in Lanarkshire and Hamilton, that they've announced that they're partnering with American giant CoreWeave. They've announced $1.5 billion investment in a state-of-the-art data centre in Lanarkshire. It comes as part of the wider $3 billion series of investments from CoreWeave into centres across the UK. And that was also announced as part of the Trump visit. So great news for Scotland, especially great news for Lanarkshire.
I mean, that's amazing, Willie. Do we know the site it's going to go on?
Well, I know that they're based in Hamilton, so I don't know if it's an existing site, but generally these data centres take up, a fair bit of land. So I don't know if it's there or somewhere else adjacent to that, but it's great that it's in the county that I live in, so I'm delighted. And it seems that they're using cutting-edge technology to address the problems that come with a data centre, which is obviously the power it requires and the water it requires. So it'll be interesting to see if they have ticked the boxes on this. But great news for Lanarkshire and Scotland.
Well, I think when that comes to fruition, that whoever's behind bringing that here, well done. Solving the power is the huge thing for data centres. As you and I know, Britain pays the highest energy costs for any country in the G7, which we could never understand because Scotland's got renewables. I was at one of our scale-up dinners last night, Willie, down at Blair, and one of the guys who's in that business said, for the first time in history, at 3 a.m, so that wasn't last night, the night before, the grid was completely run by renewables for 1 hour. That's never happened before, Willie.
Amazing.
So that's amazing.
Well, that's a giant step in the right direction. We can't wait until it's 23 hours a day, not just one. And we're all working on that. Bad news. I've seen that Baillie Gifford in Edinburgh are maybe paying some people off. The investment company. I think the redundancies are due to technology and things moving on. I hope this isn't the first sign of AI is actually eating people's jobs. But it's a wee bit of a blow for Edinburgh and for Baillie Gifford. Yeah,
I mean, viewers and listeners might not know about Baillie Gifford. It's an amazing company based in Edinburgh. It's a partnership owned by its partners, but I don't know what the latest numbers are, but the last time I looked, they had $280 billion under investment, Willie. And you would never know any of the partners. You and I know James Anderson, who left Baillie Gifford after being a pioneer in one of their funds called the Scottish Mortgage Investment Fund. It was neither Scottish nor to do with mortgages, so I don't know where they get the name from. But James was the pioneer into Tesla, into Amazon, into businesses. He went round the world and he made so much money for Baillie Gifford. So I hope everything's okay there.
Right. Tom, moving on. See that inflation is kept steady at 3.8% for August. Well, the price of food and drink is probably running at, maybe a wee bit more than that. But this is the fifth straight month, right? It's continuing to rise. Are we beginning to see the bedding in of the NI shock and the global inflation tail off?
So what I'm worried about, Willie, in the UK economy is how much the government is having to borrow to keep us afloat. And there's all sorts of figures and acronyms. Let's just keep it simple. In the first 5 months of this year, the government's borrowed £83.8 billion, which is the highest borrowing since the pandemic. And if we look at our income, which is taxes, versus our spending, in the month of August alone, we had to borrow £18 billion to balance the books. It was only supposed to be 12.5. Now, if you and me were running a business where our income was well below our expenses, we would be doing something about it. This has led to the price of debt, so what the government can borrow at, just the same as any business. The people who lend the government money have said, you don't look as good a bet as you did, therefore we're putting up the interest rates. And this is a real problem for the UK. It's a problem for other countries, France and Italy, but we only really care about the UK here. And one of the people who I listen to quite a lot about the UK economy is Lord Wolfson. He runs Next. And I just want to quote his words. he said that medium to long term, the outlook for the UK economy does not look favourable. We're going to have anaemic growth, job opportunities are going down, and new regulation, he's talking about the Employment Rights Bill, which we talked about last week, is going to erode competitiveness. And the government, and this is a key line, the government is spending money beyond its means. So that, I am now worried, and I don't want to be doom and gloom. That's your job to be doom and gloom, Willie, not my job. I'm worried about this budget in November the 26th because we're just spending money which we don't have. And you and I know if we were looking at any company that had this sort of balance sheet, we'd be saying, we need to fix this. So I don't know where we go. We talked about it last week, how if in a Labour government, when some things want to be cut in the welfare budget, some MPs maybe rightly say, no, you can't cut that. But Rachel Reeves is in a bind, Willie. What do you think?
Two things on that. It's interesting, especially coming from Lord Wolfson, who I agree with, that he is saying this at a time when he is personally, his business, smashing it. Right,
Yes.
Better results,
Yes.
better profits. It'll be over $1 billion this year again. So you have to listen to people when they're being successful, when they're telling you that you have to beware. And to be fair to him, he's not living in a bubble. He's talking about the whole country and how it's been affected in all ways. But it's interesting, Tom. I know you love a stat, right? And you just mentioned there about taxes.
Yes.
Let me drop this on you. Do you know that someone, we keep getting these calls for the people, for the rich to pay more, right? Which we all agree we do, right? Someone earning £25,000 a year pays £2,500 a year, £2,500 a year in tax.
Okay.
Someone earning £150,000 pays £54,000 a year in tax. So what that means is someone who is earning 6 times the amount of money is paying 20 times the amount of tax.
Wow, Willie. I like a stat, but I don't like that stat.
So this is what people have to look at and understand about what actually people who are making more, what they're actually doing. 1% of the population pays 29% of all tax, right? 10% of the population pays 66% of all tax, right? Nearly 44% of the population nearly hardly pay any tax, right? So it's just to give people an idea about when they're saying, we need to tax the rich more or people who are earning more. That's the cold facts about what people are actually paying in tax.
I mean, I don't know where we go with this because obviously we want to help people who can't help themselves, but perhaps the welfare system has gone a bit too far. I don't want to sound like the Daily Mail here and come out with, one example of something which sets the whole policy, but we are living beyond our means. We're not bringing in enough tax, and the answer, in my opinion, is not more tax, it's more growth. And then your tax take goes up. But I don't think Rachel Reeves reads the same books as me, Willie. I don't think so. So I think the whole country is a bit worried about the budget, and it's definitely showing Next is doing well, but I think the general public out there, they're worried and they're thinking, maybe I'll just hang on to my pound in my pocket. And they're just saying, let's just wait and see, because consumer spending is just going down, in my opinion, and the job opportunities are going down. That's always the worry, Willie, isn't it?
Yeah, and on that, in the few minutes we've got left, a few topics we've been covering over the last few months, maybe last year. Obviously, you've been saying for a long time, and I've been backing you up, that the hospitality industry is on its knees. And if you see the statements this week from Tennent, and the parent company C&C, that they're absolutely telling you across the whole sector, all publicans are struggling.
Yeah. So I want to just finish with a couple of well done to the Scottish Government. Willie, I know you'll fall off your seat at this, but when the Scottish Government do something good, we like to say well done. The first thing is Alexander Dennis. Now, this is a bus maker in Larbert by Falkirk. And I'm not for government intervention, but in this case, the management of that company said, we're closing the Scottish plant and we're moving to Scarborough. So John Swinney came up with a £4 million lifeline, but he's intelligently put in conditions here, working with Adrian Gillespie at Scottish Enterprise, and they've said the £4 million will be put in if it's a bridge to a sustainable future. So the company has to get orders that prove it's sustainable, Willie. Also, the workers there have helped by looking at new terms and conditions. I just hope the management have did that as well, because when the workers chip in, I hope the management's chipped in as well. But I think this is an intelligent use of taxpayers' money, and it only kicks in if the company can prove they'll use the $4 million to get to a sustainable future and get their orders up. Any thoughts on this one, Willie?
I agree. Anything at all, government intervention that's going to help, safeguard 300, 400 jobs is a good idea. But I think they're right to put in those caveats. It just can't be that we've put money down to help the guys stay in employment for the next 6 months and nothing happens. So I would like to see what the plan is that actually proves that this is a bridge to the continuation of Alexander Dennis. But it'll be interesting to see. Or how do we look at helping the guys in Alexander Dennis, retrain so they're gainful employment, and some of the guys as well from Grangemouth, so from the Ineos place. So, but I agree with you. This is a good move. It takes a bit of uncertainty away for the workers there, which is great. And let's hope that they can come up with a plan. And I think, to be fair, you made the point. I think everybody's going to have to come together. A wee bit of give and take in order for it to be sustainable going forward. But on that...
Can't it just be the workers?
No, it's everything. So just to finish, our topic we talk about like nearly every week, housing.
Yeah.
Right, and obviously some good announcements this week, so well done to the Cabinet Secretary, to Mary McAllen, on especially if you're building new houses with built to rent, there'll be no cap. Which is great, and I think that'll get investment. But that is tempered by the fact that from the UK, Tom, that a friend of yours, Steve Morgan, has made the point that he represents one of the biggest builders in Redrow and Barrett, that there's no chance of the targets that have been set down by the UK government being met. They're being missed at the moment. So what do we do? And we've said that we're small enough in Scotland maybe to kickstart that. So what can we do? What's your thoughts on that?
So first of all, I'd like to thank Marie McAllen. She's listened and taking the cap off of the build-to-rent sector. I went and spoke to Kate Forbes about this. There was hundreds of millions sitting in the sideline which wouldn't come to Scotland. Let's keep this simple, Willie. The way to sort the housing crisis is build more houses.
Yeah.
Wow. What an amazing revelation. So putting red caps on slows people building more houses. So this is good. So well done, the Scottish Government. Now, coming to Steve Morgan, Steve really knows his stuff. He started his career digging ditches down in Liverpool, and he's the biggest shareholder now in one of the biggest builders, Barrett Redrow, in the UK. So Steve knows his stuff, and him and I have sat, and he said right at the beginning, unless there's a concerted effort in terms of planning, in terms of skills, in terms of apprentices, in terms of utilities, the government's never going to hit these targets because builders are constrained. It's quite simple, Is it simple to sort? Well, I suppose if it was, other governments would have did it. But for some reason, government can't seem to do it, Willie. So I don't know. Can I finish off finally? The Kilt Walk finished in Edinburgh last weekend. I got my weekends mixed up a few weeks ago, but myself and Chris Haughey wonderful Chris Haughey, 11 times world champion, 6-time Olympian champion, led off the walkers in Edinburgh. So the 4 walks this year, 2025, total of 34,000 walkers, 19,000 of them in Glasgow.
Amazing.
Have raised £8 million for over 1,800 different Scottish charities. And we've now been in charge of it for 10 years. And in those 10 years, £58 million has been raised for 4,000 different Scottish charities. Well done to Paul Cooney and the Kiltwalk team. Thank you to Arnold Clark and Johnson Carmichael. Keep on walking.
Brilliant. What an achievement.
The Go Radio Business Show with TryWire.com.
Tom, brilliant guest on the show this week. Aptly named Jamie Hunter, right, who's the COO of
Jamie
Aveni.
Hunter, Willie.
Yeah.
I was expecting to see my son.
A very familiar name, I've heard.
Exactly. Well, he's actually in to talk about his inheritance. Jamie, welcome to the show. Tell us a wee bit about Aveni and how you've got to where you are.
Well, hi all. Thanks for having me today. So, I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Aveni. Aveni are an AI business who specialise on financial services. I am not technical. How I ended up in the murky world of AI, I'm not entirely sure, but kind of my background, I'm an accountant, had spent kind of 15 years prior to this in kind of corporate life, and myself and an ex-colleague and another kind of went on to found Aveni effectively. Yeah.
And before that, any entrepreneurial spark in the family? What made you want to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I was brought up in East Kilbride. My dad's a financial advisor. He had his own business for kind of 15 years, 20 years, a kind of local IFA business. But I think I wouldn't say that's what drove the entrepreneurial side. I was always quite interested in starting a business in some capacity. Mum and dad were always very much like, go for it. It certainly instilled the confidence to, kind of go and push the boundaries and stuff like that. But I was always keen on ideas, but at the same time, never entirely sure what way to take it. So I ended up becoming an accountant. I suppose largely a good career path, but B, I thought it was probably a good way for me to potentially future and move into business. And then, post that, I started Aveni after a kind of bit of a corporate life.
So how did the conversation start with you and the partner about going to do your own thing?
So we both worked together at Standard Life. I kind of headed up the commercial finance team and he headed up the strategy team. So we worked quite closely together. We had just went through a fairly big, messy merger at Standard Life and there was a kind of opportunity to take redundancy. Joseph was doing an MBA at the University of Edinburgh where he met the other co-founder, Lexi. So Lexi she's an academic, she's a kind of world leader in cognitive technology and she was looking for ways to kind of commercialise the technology and her and Joseph had a few chats while he was doing his MBA and he ended up kind of doing the dissertation on what was the first version of the business, which was Hatch. Me and him had spoke for a fair bit around, how we could potentially take it forward. And then, because we both took redundancy, we got the chance to go and kind of push it forward.
So was that the catalyst, necessity?
No, I mean, we both kind of pushed more for voluntary redundancy to kind of make this happen, but it certainly helped. By that point, you've kind of obviously grown your salary, you've got a family and stuff. So to be able to go and make that jump, it certainly helped that we had the redundancy.
So Jamie, can I ask you, how did you fund the early stage of the business?
Yeah, so we've been through, I suppose, a fairly typical tech journey. At the start, me and Joseph and Lexi and a few others were kind of just trying to make some traction on their own, effectively. Then we won Scottish Edge, of which I know you'll be very familiar with. So, we won Scottish Edge in 2019, and at the same time, we managed to get one of our ex kind of managers to invest in the business, so via SEIS. So we took on a little bit of cash. We had Scottish Edge. at that early stage, really, you're trying to prove two things. There's a big market, we are credible, and that there's some traction. So things like Scottish Edge actually were really important, because it demonstrates that people have assessed the business, validated it, gave us a bit of cash, but almost that validation was really critical. And then we raised money from an angel syndicate called Tri Capital, which was an interesting story. So they're based out in Melrose. Joseph and I went up and presented at a rugby club to kind of that syndicate. The leader of Tri Capital was very pro of any. I think at the early stage, it's really, really critical that you get someone that kind of backs you, because they're taking a big risk. Like, at the end of the day, we didn't have a lot of traction. So we managed to get that angel syndicate to invest the week before COVID. It was, and the only reason why it happened the week before COVID was because I was having twins. So effectively we managed to get that round done with an advanced subscription. We got the cash. It was with Tri Capital. I was going to have twins a week.
No, credit where credit's due. Your good lady was going to have twins.
She was going to have twins, 100%, exactly. So yeah, a bit of a carnage time. I had a 2-year-old. I was about to have twins, or Katie was about to have twins. We managed to kind of secure the cash. Then like a week later, obviously the kind of markets dropped and stuff. So there was a lot of pressure on that cash.
Right.
It was all matched by Scottish Enterprise via that syndicate. Brilliant. So that, we're probably a good story of the ecosystem, Scottish Edge, Angel Syndicate, Scottish investors with Scottish Enterprise alongside that.
So it does work. So we say every week that the ecosystem here is fantastic.
Yep.
People just know how to work it, and I think that you're a prime example of how it can work for you.
Yep.
Yeah, so well done to Adrian and all the team at Scottish Enterprise.
100%, I'm very proud.
And Evelyn and all the team at Scottish Edge, who had the first faith in you.
Yeah, no, exactly. Very pro the ecosystem.
Yeah. And so, customers, what's your customer base look like? If you're allowed to tell us.
Yeah, no, so we are very much focused on financial services. We believe that to get return on investment from AI, you need to be aligned to that sector. And it's that 10, 15, 20% at the end that aligns it to the workflows of that sector or the business problems of that sector that matter. We've had really strong traction in wealth, so financial advice, really. So ultimately, it's a kind of co-pilot that's really focused on that particular kind of market. So we auto-populate CRM systems, create the suitability report. So driving really strong kind of return in that market. So financial advice is probably where we've had the most traction. We took on investment last year from a company called Puma, but Lloyds and Nationwide as well. So that kind of bought us really strong, big kind of banks that we can start to move into. So we've made some pretty strong traction in the banking space as well. So they're the two focus areas down.
Jamie, can I stop you there? Just because I was at a scale-up dinner last night down at Blair for the Scale-Up Scotland thing that we run, and everybody was talking about scaling companies and raising finance. So you've kind of skirted over raising finance. I think you've been pretty good at raising finance. So any tips for scaling businesses listening or watching today about how to get organised so that you're investor ready?
Yeah, I think there's obviously lots of different stages to it. And I think in the first stages, as I said, really it's much more about being able to demonstrate a big market and that you guys have conviction behind the plan, right? So, and they're investing in, they know that the big crazy revenue numbers that you're telling them aren't going to happen, right? But they're supporting the fact that, you have a plan to take that forward and drive the business forward. So I think in the early stages, one of the things that I thought kind of was really quite important was putting the time in to kind of professionalise the materials. So to make the decks look like you guys knew what you were doing, and there's loads of ways that you can do that, but if you're a really small business, you can invest in someone from Fiverr making your PowerPoint look great, or you can use GPT now and stuff. But I think putting that position across of we mean business here, professional, really important. As you start to grow and you're bringing in, so we've now raised, so a company called PAR invested. That was a slightly new institutional kind of style of angel investor. So that was different again. You know, they wanted to see, you know, more traction, more financials, kind of you had to have all your clear materials available for the data room and stuff. Then one further at the last investment round with kind of Lloyds and Nationwide and Puma. You know, you start to transition at that point into you've got to be able to show, you know, the history, where you've spent the money, where you plan to spend the money, your financial model and all that becomes a lot more important, your SaaS metrics. So yeah, I mean, being prepared is probably the key takeaway there.
Right. And do you think there's a good, obviously you're a chartered accountant, is there a good advisory sector in Scotland that can help you with that, or do you just do it yourself? Or
yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I have largely done it myself, right. And I suppose there's two parts. Joseph's really strong at the story, making everything sound amazing, right? And that's his strength. Is, you know, let's put onto this deck something that everyone can get behind. I'm strong at probably building out the detail that sits behind that kind of supports it. So internally, we kind of had that. I suppose you can bounce. I would say you probably need to do the first version yourself, because you need to tell the story. You need to go to investors and they need to believe it. And like, to be honest with you, that's an iteration. Every investment round we've been through, you start with a story, kind of works, but you start to realise the areas that maybe don't quite resonate, or the parts that you need to have a little bit more kind of meat on the bone, and you evolve from that. So, personally, we haven't used advisors yet. I am not advisors, but professional services are an interesting one in that as you go through the startup journey, there's no shortage of people who take your cash. You need to be careful. you need to be careful, right? Like, in all honesty, and I think it's like it often comes with a lot of promise that it's going to deliver all the answers, but you know, a lot of the times you know the answers yourself, right? You need to just do it.
So let me ask you this. It's interesting that point you just made. I remember when I was chairman of Scottish Enterprise Glasgow, when we gave money to the third sector, that I used to warn all the people all the time, when you get money, especially in your sector, beware of vultures.
100%. And it's real. It's real.
People just know how to go in there and help take money off of people, especially people who they think they got the money handed to them. So it's difficult. But let me ask you this. So on that point about presenting, and obviously, you know, your partner is the sales guy, you're the guy mopping up behind, and the lady's the person who puts it all together. I think on your last presentation to get funds into the business, say like more than 12 months ago, what would your projections look like against the projections you showed them?
It's actually really interesting, right? Do you know what? I think at that last investment round, you're starting to get more into the realms of people are going to hold you accountable for it, right? So last one was our Series A. There's an expectation that you kind of go to market. I mean, obviously falling slightly short, but we've had good revenue growth. Like pre that, we were quite pilot centric. You're always playing this wee dance of trying to kind of make the pilot sound like their annualised revenue and all that sort of stuff. I think post that investment, you know, it's been much more kind of like 2 to 3 year contracts with kind of 3x the revenue and stuff. So I think I would focus on the investment decks in the first year or two. I'm finding it really interesting doing this investment just now. So we're raising money again. And like, you can speak to one VC investor, and we did. We spoke to one VC investor out of the US, talking about getting, you know, just like 70 odd million of revenue in the next few years. Said it wasn't enough. Like, you know, like honestly, like they were like, that's not enough. We need more revenue growth now, and it's almost like, depending on the different investors, it's like they just want to see the ambition of the revenue versus the reality of it.
That wasn't an investor you were after. That was a unicorn hunter.
Yeah, exactly, and that's a real thing. 100%.
But that's what they all want. That's what they're used to in the States. But I think that it's interesting you made the point. You just made him right. Every week he makes a statement, and you just made it right, saying when you know you put figures out that you're not going to believe? Why do people not come with figures that we're going to believe?
I think you're always going to go with the first year or two, but it's because there's an expectation. It's almost like investors are discounting that already. Yeah. So they discount what you put in.
Yeah. Here's my one bit of advice, and to be fair, I've never been in front of any, right?
Yeah.
But I would definitely get advisors who understand the way that investors think.
Yeah, not.
And before you put a presentation together.
That's the key, Willie.
Yeah.
That's the key. I mean, one of the key takeaways of last night's dinner was, if you're in a business which has got big ambition, you really need to be going to America for the money, which I found disappointing. But those are different sorts of investors. You've just said it, Jamie. And you need an advisor who understands those investors, because we sitting here in the west of Scotland probably don't understand those investors. But if you've got huge ambition for your company, you need to understand it. So interesting point, Willie. Interesting.
Yeah, so the strap line when you've got an American investor, your opening remarks are, we know that you're looking for a unicorn. This is better than that.
Yeah, they want a category defining solution effectively. Yeah. And as you say, as kind of Tom's saying there, understanding the various different categories of investor, because there's a lot of investors out there, is important. And what you want from those investors.
Yeah. So I'm quite clear. You mentioned that obviously you have Lloyds and you have Nationwide as investors, and you also mentioned about wealth management.
Yeah.
So if I'm right, that what you're saying is the tool that you're providing, right, will help them make decisions when it comes to maybe their wealth management side of the business, which they would all love to grow tomorrow. Right?
Yeah.
Right. In your own background, in your partners, one of your partners' background is that you were in that world.
Yep.
Right. What's to stop you if you've got all the tools and you actually creating a wing where you offer wealth management services directly?
It's a good question, and one that has probably been discussed multiple times. But the reality of actually setting up a wealth business is pretty difficult. Direct to consumer kind of is a totally different business than effectively creating a kind of B2B style solution. I think the technology is all there. We've made the strategic decision to provide the technology to that sector. And I think it's going to be a really interesting space over the next kind of 3 to 5 years, because everyone's kind of moving towards trying to lower the wealth bar here, go for that advice gap. You've got banks, wealth management firms, pension providers, all kind of trying to move into this area, leveraging the technology. So I think for us, we feel there's a bigger opportunity to help facilitate or drive that forward versus going and proactively being a wealth manager ourselves. Yeah. But that's kind of the octopus model. That's kind of the sort of thing that they've done.
Do you have a agreement with the financial institutions, Lloyd, where if what you provide, that you can demonstrate that it's enhancing their product more and more, if you get a mechanism there for getting more margin?
Yeah, our products are largely around making the professionals more productive. Yeah. So it's less around us being the person who delivers the advice, for example, and more around, transitioning that financial advisor much more heavily to being able to focus on the customer, much more financial. They're the financial coach. They're the person who can spend their time on the customer, and the AI is in the background effectively doing the administration. And that's kind of the place that we're playing versus actually being the ones who want to go and deliver the advice off the back of it. Yeah.
One of the worries that I have about AI is that, and I'm sure Tom would back this up, that in our successes in growing our businesses over the last 30, 40 years, that nothing could beat that personal touch. Yeah. Having that bank manager where you had a relationship. And my whole worry about AI is that it's going to be lost more and more every day.
Yeah, I think that the majority of use cases that I see in AI is more around, how do we augment with humans how do we lean into where humans deliver value, which is exactly that. It's the ability to have a conversation. It's kind of largely why robo-advice failed, because people want to speak to someone when it comes to kind of financial decisions and stuff. So much more around how do we make that hyper efficient. And the problem you've got with stuff like advice is that it's too expensive, so people don't do it. And I suppose the whole point of the technology is that it makes it more affordable, so you can potentially get access to you can get access to someone, but all of the administration and process that sits around that is now removed, and I think you'll see that in multiple places. That's where it feels like banks are moving towards. So hyper-personalised, kind of, natural language interfaces that you can speak to someone about your financial position. And that can only be a good thing, because a lot of people don't engage with their finances well enough.
Yeah, so Jamie, as we finish up here, how much have you raised? What size is the company today? And what's your ambition?
So we've raised 20 million today.
Wow.
We've now got around about 70 employees, kind of split across the UK, remote first, but kind of at least half of them in Scotland, which is really positive. We're moving now into the next stage of growth, so kind of out of that startup into kind of scale up phase. So ambition wise, we want to grow in the UK market, so we want to grow across financial advice, banking and other FS verticals, and then we're beginning to consider what international looks like, so probably through some form of partnership strategy, expanding into the EU and the US.
So 30 seconds left for an advert for the company. Tell the viewers, the listeners, how they can get in touch if they're interested.
Perfect. So if you're in financial services, you're a financial advisor, a risk professional, or in some form of AI innovation team, then we would love to speak to you. You can find out more about what we do at aveni.ai.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jamie. Pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you very much.
The Go Radio Business Show with TryWire.com.
This week we have a fantastic guest on the board you can't afford. We've got John McKee, who is the Managing Director of Next Energy. John, welcome to the programme.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me.
Brilliant. Great. So tell us a wee bit about yourself, a bit about the business, and then we'll get into your question.
Well, I've been involved in the sector, the renewable energy sector, for around about 14, 15 years.
Wow. So you're a pioneer.
Yeah, seen the good and the bad of the industry. More good, thankfully. Next Energy, we are a commercial installer of solar PV and battery storage systems. We predominantly install for the commercial properties, business to business, do quite a bit of work in the agricultural sector as well, especially being an Ayrshire business. There's obviously a big number of agricultural businesses there and farms there, so that's a huge market for us. As I say, I've seen a lot of changes in the market, going from the high feed-in tariffs when it was the domestic market mainly, and there was a real driver for people putting systems in for financial benefit. That's changed a bit over time, especially in the domestic market, and then coming into the commercial sector where it's business to business. There's two reasons that people are installing. They're installing for the financial savings that they can make within their business, which is huge, but also to achieve the goal of net zero and help with their ESG figures as well. So the market's really changed, and I think we've changed with the market, which I think is important. So we've seen a number of changes in the market as well, but it's very buoyant. It's a really exciting sector to work in. Changes weekly. There was a sort of time where it was changing every couple of days, but it changes weekly. New products, new approaches, new customers, and I think we are positioned really well at the minute in the sector to push forward and scale the business up.
So let me ask you a question before you ask me a question. I live on a farm.
Yes.
Right. Obviously, my energy costs are through the roof, right? So someone advised me to talk to somebody like you. Do you come along and look at the farm, look at our usage, and then do you come up with a plan about what it would take, what you'd like to fit, many solar panels, battery storage, all of that, and then do you say definitively, here's how much here's your capital outlay to get all this kit, but here's how much you would save over that period of time?
Yeah, so that's the approach we take. It's a very, when you boil it down, it's a very simple approach. You have got a problem, we'll come in and we'll look at that problem, we'll take away your half-hourly readings for your energy usage over a 12-month period. We'll discuss any future plans you might have on the farm, any additional kit that you might want to be installing, and then we'll go away and do a bespoke design for your specific requirements, and then come back with the design and a proposal for what would benefit you in the long term.
Yeah. So if I'm being told by politicians at the moment that and this is true, that the number one thing that people want to talk about on their doorstep is their energy costs, right? It's frightening. So obviously you're working in the commercial market.
Yeah.
Do you think, is there any way that you're maybe going to, look at doing domestic installs? Is there enough people in that field?
There's a number of people in that field. That field was very diluted for a while. It's sort of changing slightly now. That is something that we will be looking to get involved in. There's the financing side's always been difficult for domestic properties now because there's not as big a financial return on a feed-in tariff or anything like that. There is other options to look at regarding finance, whether that be PPAs for housing authorities or housing associations, or local authorities. So we do look to get involved in the domestic market as well.
Yeah. I have found over the last couple of years, and this is mostly from building houses and obviously dealing with big customers. 5 years ago, 4 years ago, everybody spoke about ESG.
Yeah.
So that was a big thing. So it's not only about saving money, it was about doing your bit for the planet.
Yeah.
There is no doubt in the sector that I'm working in house, but whatever, people now don't want to talk about it. So it's all about money now.
Yeah.
Right? It's not about my ESG. So, when we were building the new apartments here, everybody was asking me about car chargers.
Yeah.
We're going to have one. Since we built those apartments, and not one person has asked for a car charger, right? Because I'm not buying an electric car.
Yeah.
Right? Because they feel as if the government, that we put the whole burden on them for getting to, net zero. So I just wondered if I would imagine, especially in agriculture at the moment with farmers, because they're struggling, that 90% of the reason for looking at yourself would be about financial rather than ESG. Yeah,
and again, it depends on where they sit in the supply chain.
Yeah.
So we have got customers who, just for instance, own a dairy farm.
Yeah.
Their driver is to cut costs.
Yeah.
Fix the bottom line, make more money. There's other farmers who will be in a supply chain to big brands.
Yes.
Who are getting leaned on from above.
Yeah.
And they're coming at it from two positions. They're looking to get control of their costs, but they also need to ultimately tick a box for their supplier. Yeah. For their in the supply chain.
Again, I'd have thought 3, 4, 5 years ago this was critical. I believe that's waning as well.
Yeah.
Because they've actually dropped their commitment. Some of the big guys who are in the supply chain above, the purchasers, have actually tried that. But it's interesting. I think it's a huge sector at the moment, and I wish more and more people were using it. So what is your question for the boards you can't afford?
So currently we are trying to scale and scale with control. Yeah. So my question is, when you were scaling, what single decision did you take that helped you scale quickly and controlled? And if you were to implement that decision today, how would that look?
Right, okay. So I've mentioned this before, but I'll mention this story, right? And it was not part of my plan. We were a £30 million turnover facilities management company. basically 99% on what we call hard services, so technical services. We were not cleaning, we were not doing admin, none of that. And my biggest customer at the time, Asda, asked me to come down to a meeting down in Leeds, and I went down to Leeds, went out for dinner with the CEO, and during dinner he said to me, I need you to take on cleaning. Of which I said, no chance. We don't know anything about cleaning. I don't want to be in that market. So no, fine. And he said to me, no, you have to. You have to take on cleaning. I want an integrated service for facilities management. I want it all to be one company. So I'm saying no to this potential uplift in business. Remember, I'm turning over 30 million in the whole group. And I wake up the next morning and I've got a turnover of £120 million. So I'm saying no to cleaning, which was 3 times the size of my business. But the problem that came with that was I had to 2P transfer 6,500 people to 13 other disparate companies. So it was in the early days, it was the largest scale up of the business. The people think, oh, it's fantastic if you could go out and, multiply your turnover by 3x, in a day. That's wonderful. All the things that come with that are a nightmare. But we were really, really lucky that in the UK, obviously 2P exists, so we could 2P transfer 6,500 people into our business in a 6.5 week, period, which was amazing. The HR team done brilliant. So that was the first singular scale up, which was not in the plan. So I can't tell you what my plan was because I didn't even want it to happen. But what I can tell you about other things, one of the things that we did do that created a huge scale up for us, where we did mean to do it, was we made the opportunity to open in Australia. So we had an opportunity to open in Australia, doing exactly what we do here. And I went out there for 12 weeks, studied the market, studied the competition of the person I was going to deliver the service for. And we decided to invest £1 million, $1 million actually, in what we thought was a good investment in Australia. And I would say to you that within 6 months, we'd all our capital back. So it was a free roll in Australia, and this is 15 years ago. So I would need to say to you that our ROI, our business in Australia now turns over $600 million, makes a lot of money. So that's probably the biggest part of the scale up that ever happened in the business. That was planned. We were very fortunate because it's a people business, it's no capital intense. So we only had to invest, $1 million, and say very quickly we had our money back. And the money that's generated through the years now has allowed us to open in America and open in Hong Kong, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur. So that one decision was forced upon me, which was great, worked out okay. And the other one, we made a decision that today, it started off way back then, 15 years ago. I believe we're about $110, $120 million turnover, and it's now 5 times, 6 times the size of that. So it's interesting in my own experiences how these 2 examples, but for you, I would say that scale up, how long have you been in business?
The Next Energy has been a year. A
year in business, right? And in that year, what have you grown?
The turnover
from zero to...
From zero up to just around about £1 million.
Right, okay, so that's good for your first year in business. I think that what you have to do is that you have to sit down and say, here's what we'd like to get to.
Yeah.
So if you doubled in size, people would tell you that's great. Right, so that might not be enough for you. You might want to go 2 times, 3 times X. What you have to do is, what do I have to do that? Where do I get the people? Everybody can't get people at the moment.
Yeah.
Right. If I got 10 big contracts tomorrow, I'd be in trouble. Right, because I couldn't get the people. So I think it's not only what does that scale up mean to you, how do you actually deliver on it? Right. There's nothing worse in business, especially in a service business, if you overpromise and underdeliver. Yeah. So that would be my advice to you, is to sit. And also as well, my big advice to you is that whatever you want to do to scale up, go down a route where it's costing you the least amount of capital.
Yeah.
Right. So I hope that answers your question.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Right?
That's brilliant.
Thank you. Well, good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck with the business. Thank you for coming on the show.
Appreciate
Thank you. Tom, another brilliant show in the can. So hope the listeners, the viewers enjoy this, and we look forward to talking to you again next week. Thank you.